Hey, everybody. Oh, Jessica's coming in. All right. It's good to see you guys. I think we have a quorum. We have Jean here. We have me. We have Britt on the phone. We have James. And we have Jessica. There were a good burn. And so we'll call the meeting to order at 6:16. It's great to see you guys. It's been a long time. Now we're almost at the end of fall. I hope that this meeting finds you guys all well, and I appreciate you being here. At this point, we usually read some things for folks in the public who want to be joining. So I'll do that. Okay, so if you want to register to join, these are the instructions. You can go to www.missoulapublicmeetings.com and click on the link. That will get you into the meeting. And then to raise your hand for public comment, if you're on a computer or a laptop while in Zoom, click participants and raise and lower hand. If you're on your iPhone while in Zoom, click more and raise and lower your hand. If you're dialing in while in the webinar in Zoom, press *9 to raise your hand and *9 again to lower your hand. Public comment alternative is also to leave a voicemail at 406-552-6012, or you can email council@ci.missoula.mt.us. So thanks, Bella, for that. All right. If we look at the agenda, first thing is the roll call, which we sort of have done. So there's 5 board members here. There is one participant that I'm seeing whose name is Nick Furlong, who I think is from Parks and Rec. Ben, is that correct? Ben seems frozen.
Yeah, Ben messaged me and said that he's having some trouble with it freezing, but I think Nick is the new appointee from the mayor's office, but it won't be official till our next meeting. But
so he's a new board member.
Yes.
Okay, well, in that case, welcome, Nick. If you would like to introduce yourself, we would love it. If you can unmute and join, if you would like to tell us a little bit about yourself, that would be great.
Yeah, hi, I'm Nick Furlong. I'm actually a doctor that works here at St. Pat's. I regularly commute on my bicycle, ride my bicycle recreationally, and I have 2 young sons who are getting into bicycling. And this has been a passion of mine, as I only see the most serious ill patients and know how much getting around bicycle pedestrian helps people's health. So I appreciate the opportunity.
Well, we're happy that you're here. Thank you so much for joining our board. And I'll be in touch by email just to sort of give you some structure, so you kind of know how things work on the board. It's a little helpful when you're new to kind of have some framework, I think. So welcome.
Thank you.
We appreciate you. Okay. Now that we've gotten that sorted. Okay, so here is Jessica, Tuberty May, Jean, Britt, James, and Jessica present, and Nick Furlong, our pending approval new board member. And now we need to approve the previous minutes. I would say there's just a couple of typos that I noticed. My name isn't listed. It's just like a blank for the person who called the meeting to order. And there's no time, but it was a 3 p.m. meeting. And then there's a typo about a school zone. So just some like very minor editing. And with that done, I'm happy with the minutes. If anyone would like to make a motion to approve them, that would be appreciated. Well, Britt's got her hand up, but I can't hear you, Britt. Sorry.
Yes, I motion.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a second? Looking for hands.
I'll second.
Thank you, Jean. The meeting minutes from last meeting are approved. The next thing is general public comments. Hi, Jessica. It's good to see you. And Britt, I feel like it's been a while. So it's like to see your faces. So it's nice. All right. I don't see anyone here from the public, but at this time, if you are here, you have the opportunity to raise your hand and make comments, but I don't see any hands up from my viewpoint. So we're going to move on to general board member comments. I just want to say I attended the board training, the municipal board training, and I would recommend it. It was really helpful. And one of my favorite things that I learned from that was that it's helpful for the public to understand your thinking when we are voting on something. If you can say, I'm in favor of because, and then explain why, or I am not in favor of because. And that's really the best way for the public to sort of understand our thinking is when we are discussing topics. So I thought that was really good advice. The other thing that they said is that sometimes boards need a break and they need to have work sessions. And so my suggestion for next month is that the majority of the meeting be a work session where we do a work plan for the next year. We talk about what we want to have as priorities, and it's just more casual. And so I think we all deserve sort of, a less structured affair. Ben has said there's some new information that we may need to discuss in part of the meeting. I'm just hoping that it could be a really short part and the rest of it can just be us talking to each other about what we want for the next year. Okay, that's my comments. Any other board members have comments? Raise your hand. I don't see any hands, so seeing none, we will move on to comments from city staff. Ben, looks like we're diving into the sidewalk update.
Yeah, I think so. I am going to try. Hello, everybody. I was having problems with you guys cutting in and out, and so if those continue, I may turn my camera off, but we will see if that continues to happen. I do want to say that Parks is unable to make it. They had initially indicated they might be able to, but Neil emailed me and said that he unfortunately can't make it today. So hopefully he will at a later meeting, whether it's November, maybe December instead, because we want to have, I just heard Jesse say that we want November to be kind of the goal setting. As for welcome, Dr. Furlong, thank you for joining. Glad to have you aboard. We did lose another member, Kip Beckwith, had a family emergency that is not just calling him away from the board, but calling him away from Missoula as well. He is going to Oregon to hang out with family for the foreseeable future. And so there is another opening as well. And maybe that can be part of the November conversation. And a little bit too, and kind of what are we doing? What is the board working on? I've been out for most of the time since our last meeting in September. I unfortunately had a breakthrough COVID case. My wife and I both did, and even our son tested positive. And so there was 3.5 weeks that I was not in the office and not able to do too much. But that being said, before I go into more detail about sidewalks, just in general, in the intervening 6 weeks since our September meeting, we have implemented traffic calming in the Lewis and Clark neighborhood, just east of Sentinel High School, as part of the neighborhood traffic management program. That was brought to our attention by our concerns were brought up by neighbors there, specifically about high school drivers in that neighborhood. We collected data, ran it through our program, and identified that there was some need in that neighborhood. And so we implemented a series of stop signs and calming circles between Park and Bancroft, and from South Avenue on the north end and Benton on the south end. We kind of alternated stop signs and traffic calming circles in there. Go check those out if you haven't had a chance.
And those neighbors, we're working with them to help enhance and beautify those circles, similar to some of the others. In fact, Madison and I and James, in his work at the Public Arts Committee, are trying to develop a more formal program for painting murals in our traffic calming features. And so we have a meeting coming up on Wednesday, I believe, to talk more about that. Another program or policy that you may have heard about that we talked about previously has not had a lot of work done on it. That's the school zone policy that we're developing. Basically, we are trying to come up with a uniform and consistent way of managing school zones, both speed limit reductions on the main streets and our pedestrian crossings in vicinities of schools. We get, requests for new treatment by different principals or teachers or parents, and we haven't had a consistent way to address those. And so we're kind of surveying what's out there. We've identified how other communities deal with this. We've identified kind of some what we think we want to see, and now we're kind of field checking to see what actually exists and how much might it cost to bring it up to standards that we want to that we think we want to achieve. And so I will bring more information, much likely at the December meeting. I'll have like a presentation on the school zone policy that lays out kind of what the policy is and maps out where we have, where we're in compliance, where we're not, and how we're planning on tackling that. Also September was Missoula Motion's Commuter Challenge, and they had over 75 businesses participate this year. And they just had their kind of victory party and award ceremony for that last week. And so that was pretty successful considering the challenging COVID year. Any questions on any of those activities before I get into sidewalks? Are you all hearing me okay, or am I breaking up on your end? All right, I'm getting thumbs ups from Jessica and Jessica, so I feel good about that. Sidewalks, as kind of a brief overview and introduction, we in 2017 we created a pedestrian facilities. Oh, Gene.
Yeah, sorry, Ben, to interrupt. On the previous thing about Missoula in Motion and the commuter challenge.
Yeah.
So that was pretty good for, I guess, what can still be considered a COVID year. I guess one of the things I was wondering is the how does that end up affecting if they have any way of really tracking it, the overall numbers of commuters week in and week out, starting, let's say, in spring. I guess part of what I'm thinking is I mean, it's a great thing to do. I guess I'm trying to figure out what the bang for the buck is, for lack of a better term on that, in terms of getting more people out there biking and cutting down on car pollution.
Yeah, it's not just biking, it's biking, walking, taking the bus, and telecommuting. That's been a major congestion relief mechanism over the past 2 years that Missoula Motion had always been promoting, but that was maybe not as successful until we were all forced to grapple with that. The commuter challenge has taken place in the spring and in the fall. It's this year, really, we just couldn't do it in the spring because no one was really back to work yet, and so they pushed it to the fall. It may resume in springtime again, because we did find that especially for active modes, it's certainly when the weather starts getting nice, people get really excited about starting new habits and then continuing them. In the fall, maybe bus riding is the new habit, and as the weather, days get shorter and the weather gets colder, that becomes the mode that people are most excited about. But it's certainly the commuter challenge is a way to get people to try it that haven't before, and the teams that win, it doesn't mean that for a team to win, they have to have the highest percentage of employees try doing something once. So a team that has two diehard bike commuters and no one else paying attention, they're not going to do well. Whereas a team that has no one that's ever tried it before, that just does it one day in the 10 days, they're going to win. And so it really does reward the people who are new to trying these things. And the whole goal is to help establish new habits. And one of the ways to measure it is, you have to log your trips on Way to Go for them to count. And so that's the other part of the puzzle is not just getting people to change their behavior, but also to change to be logging their trips and telling us. And one of the things that we hope to do, and that we often get a chance to do, is when a business maybe realizes that this was easier or harder than they thought, they engage with Missoula in Motion to come in and talk, maybe at a lunch and learn, or maybe just have a meeting with higher ups in the business to find out ways that they can incorporate either incentives or some sort of way to encourage sustainable commuting year round, or for longer than just the challenge. Catherine would have to answer specific questions about it, and we can invite her to do that, but it certainly is a positive reinforcement and a way to get people thinking about commuting sustainably that hadn't thought about it before.
So it sounds like you got apparently a fairly decent amount of people starting out trying it versus people that have been doing it all along and just got into the challenge as part of their ongoing thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
because it's business to business, it's the entire workplace that is
Right.
needs to participate for a business to do well, and it becomes pretty competitive. I mean, and I don't mean that in the pushing each other down sense, but in the people get excited about doing this. The stakes are a pizza party for your workplace, and so the winners are handsomely rewarded that way. And then there's also drawings every day. There were gift certificates to various businesses every day, depending on who logged their trips. And so the amount of people that they had participate this year was among the highest ever, certainly much higher than last year, and maybe even goes back to several years ago when we, sometimes it just kind of depends on who's in what role at different size businesses. But for example, St. Pat's participates and they have 1,800 employees, but how effective the person who's in charge of St. Pat's is at getting every one of those people to consider this or even open the email where they have the information about this, that their percentage is relatively low. But again, in the groups that they're competing with, they can win because there aren't that many employers of that size. University departments are usually broken out. City divisions are broken out, and so I don't know how many other kind of very large employers they might be competing against. Again, Catherine would be the person to answer better. She'd have better answers to these questions than I would.
Yeah, well, that's good input. I mean, because I was, excuse me, I was wondering, was it a lot of people have commuted all summer and are just continuing? And again, are the businesses pulling in new people to give it a try? And it seems like that is the case. So that's good to hear.
It certainly is. Even our mayor's office, I think they got 100% participation this year. And I know that there are some folks there that don't, it's not part of their regular habits. And it certainly was a new experience for a couple folks there. So I think it's a good, in general, it's certainly an intense amount of work for Missoula in Motion in the lead up and during the challenge. But in terms of they work hard at kind of sustaining that behavior change, or trying to work with the employers to sustain that behavior change throughout the year. Anything else before I move on to sidewalks? So historically, we have had, the city of Missoula has had what was called a master sidewalk plan. This was a document that was created in the early 90s by a former engineering project manager, and it remained in draft form because we never, it changed a little bit over time and it never got an official approval or adoption. But it basically, that identified priority areas, starting with the center of the city, with downtown, and then kind of radiating outwards, and prioritizing our main streets over local streets. And it was it made sense for a while, especially the person who created it, has lived in Missoula for close to 70 years. And he was intimately familiar with many of the nooks and crannies of our community, and knew where, generally had a good sense of where people were trying to go. And it involved pedestrian generators and destinations, and prioritized in a way that made a lot of sense, especially considering the available data that he had. But in the 5 years ago or so, we recognized that this was not necessarily resulting in the types of projects moving forward that we wanted to see, that were emerging as higher priorities based on the way that Missoula was growing and the types of places that people were walking, the types of places we were getting requests for sidewalks. And so we, when that person moved on from the city, we, Aaron Wilson and his group, kind of took over development of a new pedestrian facilities master plan. And many people on the Bike Ped Board at the time were involved with helping develop that. And so I'm going to share my screen, because it is, this is probably easier. But so it's on the Missoula MPO website, missoulaMPO.com, and you can go to plans and find the pedestrian facilities master plan. But basically, it looks at existing conditions, and establishes goals: improving pedestrian safety, achieving mode split goals adopted in the LRTP. I'm going to find this chart. So in the long range plan, we identified that we want, right now, about 6% of our trips are made by walking. By 2045, we want 18% of our trips to be made by walking. And so that is a major goal of our pedestrian facilities plan. We want to improve public health and equity outcomes, emphasize pedestrian connectivity that is accessible for all users, support economic growth and vitality, increase sustainability efforts, utilize land use and community design to support pedestrian scale infrastructure. And that's a good place for me to mention that no matter how much infrastructure we build, kind of the best pedestrian plan is one that puts a diversity of land uses within walking distance of where people live. And so finding ways to improve our growth policy and our zoning maps to make sure that there are a variety of destinations within our residential neighborhoods, or at least alongside, so that people can live their lives. The concept of a 15-minute city is one that is gaining a lot of popularity, and so that people can essentially accomplish most of their tasks and shopping by walking. So there are, a set of guiding principles to help achieve those goals. We looked at existing conditions, including we had, identified different facility types, but we also identified sidewalk conditions, what's missing, and then what shape things are in. And so we had a team of citizen volunteers that we trained how to use an app that you downloaded, where you could score existing sidewalk segments from 1 to 10 is new sidewalk, and 1 is totally failing, major cracks and upheaval and things like that. And so basically, this is the conditions report, where things are in really rough shape, poor to failing, and to fair to good to excellent. And again, this was based on, even though we looked panel by panel, each block was assigned an average based on how well it did. And we looked at safety. Here are crash locations, in the city. Unsurprisingly, perhaps downtown has the highest percentage of pedestrian crashes. Or highest numbers of pedestrian crashes. It also has the highest numbers of pedestrians, and so it's tough to actually quantify crash rates because we don't have counts everywhere. It's just kind of, we know that the most people are walking downtown. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Orange Street is where this conglomeration of reds is, which feels certainly like a barrier, more so than Higgins or our other streets downtown. This looks at fatal and incapacitating crashes. They are going down over time. The trend line is decreasing, which is good, but it's still, the numbers are small enough that a bad year could throw that off quite a bit. Again, here's the mode share. This is where we've been going. Kind of how Missoula goes is this orange line. Green is Montana, stays kind of flat. This is the national average, so we're doing much better. But here's where our goal is out in 2045. And so again, some major things need to change for us to hit that goal. We conducted surveys, and then we performed a pedestrian needs analysis. So we basically developed criteria for identifying where in town our needs are that, there's miles and miles of missing sidewalk. I think we've identified that at the current rate of funding sidewalks, it will take over 100 years for us to fill in all of the gaps in the city. Now, infill development is helping with that, and the redevelopment agency is also doing a really good job at building sidewalks in their urban renewal districts. But it's just, there were decades of development where we didn't require development to build them, and now we are trying to make up for that. So in order to identify exactly how we prioritize where we fill those gaps, we looked at a combination of social demographics and physical environment. So the social demographics include low to moderate income households, adult obesity levels, percentage of zero car households, percentage of persons with disabilities, and percentage of persons age 65 plus. The idea being that all of these different criteria are places where people are more likely don't have access to or can't be driving, and so it's more important for us to have a good sidewalk network there. And then physical environment scoring, we looked at attractors, so schools, bus stops, grocery stores, parks, commuter trails, post offices, medical clinics, independent living services, that emergency and support services, food, shelter, and substance abuse, and then religious and civic institutions. And then we also looked at density of both residential and employment. And so points were awarded based on how dense neighborhoods were, or really it's at the block size. So how dense a block is, and then how dense employment is in the area. And between those, we, based on public feedback, 70% of the score was assigned to the demographic side, and 30% of the score was assigned to the physical characteristics. And that produced a map that looks like this. And I'm going to hold this here for a little while. So the dark red became all of the priority areas. The high priority, the orange is moderate priority, and yellow is low priority. And again, that's based on those criteria that were all mapped. And so this has resulted in these scores then get fed into, or these priority areas get fed into how we pick what sorts of transportation projects we do all over the city, whether it's sidewalk or other types. I'll stop here for a question. Jessica.
I was just curious what constitutes a block. Is that a square footage or?
It's by census block, and so it's, yeah, I mean, within the kind of gridded center city, it's more or less a block. When you get into the South Hills, that can be a weirder shape potentially.
Sure. Okay.
Any other questions yet at this point? So this map identified routes, and again, those black lines are where all the missing sidewalks are. And so within that, these are the priorities for where we want to construct sidewalks. Now, this group has also seen our CIP list, our capital improvement program list of projects. That includes projects that aren't just sidewalk. There's full roadway reconstructions. There's safety projects like crossing enhancements and things like that. But this list, equity is, per council direction, when we score those projects against each other, we build equity and safety are scored double compared to some of the other criteria. And this map is what we use to help generate those equity pieces. We look at invest health neighborhoods, and we look also at what is a high priority in the pedestrian facilities master plan, because equity was such a huge component of the scoring. Again, all of these demographics are about trying to correct some of the inequitable and underserved investments that we've made in the past. So the other thing we looked at was safety and intersections, and this is pretty neat. We scored points. We assigned points to intersections based on the speed of the streets that are crossing, what the volumes are, and the number of lanes. And then the types of improvements then you could subtract. So a full traffic signal or a roundabout gets you the most points. A user activated gets you slightly fewer points. Marked crosswalks, median refuges, curb extensions, and other traffic calming features, fewer points still. But it's a way to, and then we mapped this based on what the scores were. So again, perhaps unsurprisingly, the main streets in town you can identify by it being harder. The intersection scores are higher, meaning it's harder to get across. Whereas in the local streets, the intersection scores are much lower. And so that intuitively makes sense, but it also helps show perhaps where needs might be. This is a table that was adapted from Federal Highways Administration guidance about when we might consider different types of treatments to get across those intersections. And so these numbers here correspond to the different types of treatments. And so when people ask for, can we get a flashing, a push button flashing light at such and such an intersection, we kind of go to this table and say, okay, what are the speeds? What are the volumes? What are the number of lanes? What does this table tell us? Should we consider it or not? And then go from there. We do additional data collection, but this is kind of a quick gut check of, is this, are we going down the right direction on how we think about these sorts of things? Because the group that did this is the Metropolitan Planning Organization, which is their jurisdiction is larger than city limits. There's a section on county prioritization. We also have we address ADA facilities and an ADA transition plan. And going through that, there's a little bit of discussion about how some of the strategies specific to vision impairments might be different than strategies specific to mobility impairments. And when we've done walking audits with people with disabilities, there is sometimes conflict there where people with vision impairments really rely on and require the truncated domes or some tactile warning to indicate where the sidewalk ends and where you cross. But if you are in a wheelchair, these can sometimes be disruptive, or if you have other mobility impairments, they can even potentially be a trip hazard. And so that's something that, again, it's not a trade-off of do you do it or not. The Americans with Disabilities Act require that they be there, but it's something that when we just meeting ADA and making something universally accessible sometimes are not the same thing. So we looked at where all of the ramps were in town and found out that if our implementation schedule, if we install the missing ADA facilities for all sidewalk only in the highest priority area, it could cost us about $82,000 per year for a grand total of $2.5 million. If we upgrade the existing, that would be only installing missing. To upgrade the existing ramps and facilities in the highest priority area, so that means even replacing some that might be relatively new but don't meet the current ADA would cost us about 100 grand a year to do that. And then to get the entire city over, and that's over 30 years. To do the entire city over 30 years, we'd have to spend over $500,000 a year just on those ADA facilities. Implementation again talks about project selection and funding, which again is it's hard to come by, but I'll get to that in a minute. But the major implementation strategies, and then some appendices on our surveys. So what this doesn't necessarily do is tell us which street to do when, because we're scoring these projects because our funding is all from the same place. We're scoring our sidewalk projects against all of the other types of projects that we're implementing. And so the funding that we do have available to us generally is gas tax, which goes to pay for some of the roadway improvements when you do a sidewalk. For example, when you build a curb and gutter, that you need to pave the asphalt back to it, so gas tax can go for those facilities. We assess adjacent property owners, and that is historically, we used to do it 100% to the adjacent property owners. About 12 years ago, we changed that. We call it a reverse insurance model, where the city pays the first $1,000, then between 1,000 and 8,000, the city and the adjacent property owner split the cost 50-50. And then between 8,000 and 20,000, the city picks up that change. And then if a project costs more than 20 grand for one parcel, then we have a conversation with the property owner and find out some way to meet in the middle on that. An example is maybe a corner lot, and a project costs 22,000. Maybe the city pays the entire thing. But another example could be a huge stretch, hundreds of feet of undeveloped single property owner, and maybe the city will pay for that with a development agreement that if that property owner sells or if that land develops, then they are responsible for back paying for the sidewalk improvements. So an agreement like that was reached on Hillview Way, for example, somewhat recently, going up into the South Hills. Other funding for sidewalk and roadway projects is the road district, it's called, and so that is basically an overlay over the entire city limits, an additional tax. The road district helps cover kind of everything related to roadways, including sidewalks. A federal funding source that we've applied for, transportation alternatives, is one that we've been unsuccessful. We were unsuccessful again this past year. We applied for both Eaton Street sidewalks and South Avenue sidewalks between Reserve and Fort Missoula. We did not get awarded those grants, and so we're not able to apply those to our sidewalk projects. That being said, several sidewalk projects have emerged as top scorers on our CIP list, and so we're moving forward with design, and hopefully we'll see construction beginning next year, after a couple-year hiatus while we did this planning and tried to reconcile with the fact that the cost of sidewalks is just growing super fast. Typically sidewalk now costs us about $1.5 million per mile, maybe more, depending on any sort of right-of-way, utility, or topographic challenges that might exist. And so the projects that have emerged, and I attached as a map to the agenda, which I don't have handy with me right this minute, but hopefully people have that near them, is we're moving forward with a project on Eaton Street between 7th and 14th in the Franklin of the Fort neighborhood. In the north side, Turner, Warden, and North 5th to connect Scott Street to Orange Street all the way across the north side. And then as part of our neighborhood greenway network, Ivy, Franklin, and Park Street kind of through the slant streets. So those are the three main projects that we're working on right now as sidewalk projects. There are roadway projects that include sidewalk components, such as South Avenue. We don't know where funding is coming from that now that we didn't get the transportation alternatives money, but we're still slowly pushing forward with design on South Avenue. Also lower Miller Creek from Linda Vista Boulevard to the new elementary school out there. There's been, and that one will likely be
Looks, you're frozen. And now
there. Am I
you're
back?
You're back. You're back.
All right, great. Zoom even like cut out and restarted for me there. How much did you hear? Did you hear about Miller Creek at all?
Start of it.
Okay, so yeah, Miller Creek is another one that we're working slowly towards, connecting Linda Vista Boulevard to Rankin Elementary, the new elementary school out there. That one will likely be, even though we're city's doing design and kind of paying for that up front, that one will likely be, and I didn't mention this, but this is another way to fund things, is a special improvement district. So that is kind of an additional tax on the impacted neighbors. And so that, because that project really, you can tie the impacts of that sidewalk or the roadway itself to all the development up there, you can we can kind of draw a line around, you can draw a circle around that neighborhood and say these are the people who are paying into making this roadway safer. And then finally, I guess that's another funding source, is transportation impact fees. And so every new development pays some amount of impact fees to try and mitigate the impacts of that new development. And while they never fully do cover those costs, it's something that we can bank and then improve the roads nearby. There are rules about how we use impact fees. For example, they need to be used nearby to the properties that paid into the area. So we can't use necessarily the impact fees that we collect from Outmullen Road to build Miller Creek facilities. The other thing is that they need to be related to capacity expansion. That's per state law. And because most people think about roadway capacity as being about driving, that has historically been what that means. As a community, though, we have come to recognize that that isn't. It's not just about driving. And so when we successfully argued with the impact, there's an impact fee advisory committee, and we've successfully convinced them that adding sidewalks, adding trails, adding bike lanes increases the capacity of that right of way, because you're providing space for more people to be able to use it. And so impact fees are a funding source, but again, they do not go very far because each development isn't paying a ton into that. Jesse, go ahead.
Okay, well, first of all, I feel like I understand sidewalks way better. So thank you so much. I know you basically walked us through that awesome document, but I feel like it was super helpful to get like the Cliff Notes version of that out there. I feel like my general perspective on it is that it seems unacceptable to get to a place where our sidewalks are available to everyone, regardless of their neighborhood, and are continuous and make the links that we want. And it will take 30 to 100 years for that. I mean, I feel like we need a municipal bond for sidewalks, and we just need to do it. Like building a new library or something like that. We need to I don't know how you get a municipal bond, but I believe that it doesn't feel very comfortable to me that we are just letting the sidewalks either not exist or be in horrible condition. Or like in my neighborhood, south of Beckwith, only 30% of the intersection sidewalks have curb cuts for people with disabilities. And so 70% of them have drops to between 1 and 3 feet. And so people who have a disability or who have an accident and need to use assistive device are out of luck. And it doesn't feel very good to me. And I feel like surely we can do better. So I'd like you to talk about the municipal bond.
That's a great question, and that was mentioned as one of the potential funding sources in the pedestrian facilities master plan. I don't know that it's been explored all of that seriously. I think that it's a good topic of conversation, and it's one that I'll bring up with Aaron and Jeremy and see how something like that could move forward. I don't even know kind of who decides and how municipal bonds might move forward, such as the parks bond or library bond. If those are friends of groups that bring those forward, or if it's staff themselves. And so it's a really good question, Jesse, and one that I know Aaron and I have just discussed in passing. Especially, one of the things that's happening is even when we put the funding together for one project and we have trouble finding people to bid on it, because while it's huge for a municipal project, it's not huge compared to for a concrete crew to say do a new development in the sawmill district or something like that. It's not as it's time consuming and maybe not as lucrative, and so it's hard to get people to bid on these. Whereas if we were able to go for a citywide municipal bond, or maybe bite off chunks of the city at once and just do it, it might be easier to sorry, Elodie distraction there. It might be easier to get good pricing from contractors and to really get someone to commit to doing something like that.
I think we should go for it. It was listed as a funding source at the top. It just said bond, but it wasn't discussed. So it was like in the list, but not discussed. But I feel like if that was our legacy as a bike pedestrian board, is that we got a sidewalk municipal bond approved, I think the city would love it, and we would feel good about that, and tell our grandchildren about it. It would be awesome.
It really would be. It would also go a long way to combating the stereotype that the board only cares about people on bikes, which, I mean, I know that we all know that's not true, but that's certainly that stereotype has existed in the past. So that would be wonderful. Britt,
Go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think this is a great idea, and also I think we should put it on our working meeting next month, our agenda, because we could also include things like a pedestrian bridge where the railroad tracks is from Broadway to Silver Park, things like that. There's a lot of pedestrian issues beyond just sidewalks, so maybe we could just put out a call for people to tell us what kinds of things they would want to see in a pedestrian bond.
All right, awesome. I love it. Yeah, we'll definitely talk about it next month when we do the work plan. I think that would be an exciting change. And I agree with you, Ben. I do think that we get sucked into talking about bicycles a lot, and it does feel good to circle back to the sidewalk issues, and it could be curb cuts for people with disabilities and new sidewalks and connecting sidewalks. James, go ahead.
I had a very similar thought to Brett, including public infrastructure such as seating and other facilities with this bond option, so that there is the added facility that can help extend people's trips and make connectivity work.
Awesome. Yeah, I love it. I think that would be great. All right, anyone else want to comment? Looks like Gene's got his hand up.
Yeah, just one comment and question. Given again, Jesse, like you, I'm fairly close to the university, and you're up by Bonner Park there. Seeing these curb cuts missing with generally a lot of other sidewalk infrastructure pretty much being there. It's like you've got this really nice chain and then this one glaring weak link. And I'm wondering how that, Ben, maybe you could fill us in a little bit, how that affects priorities to say, gee, if we're missing sidewalks for an entire 8-block stretch somewhere, and then you match that up against a place where you've got 8 blocks of really good sidewalks, and maybe half of one block is bad, and you're missing a few curb cuts. In my mind, it would seem getting more out of the funding that you're putting in some ways, of taking care of that section given the demographics, et cetera, where you're almost there, but not quite, because that 1 or 2 weak links messes up the whole chain. So I'm wondering how that fits in with, setting up what's coming down the pike, regardless of what kind of funding sources we get. I do think the municipal bond has a lot of attraction to it.
Yeah, I think that a bond especially has attraction for those sorts of projects, maybe more than the long corridors. Like, let's compare Eaton Street as an example. That's a street in the Franklin of the Fort neighborhood, historically underserved, in the high priority list. That's also a transit route. It's narrow. It has several irrigation ditches that cross it, and so you're kind of forced out into the street. There aren't even places to walk on the side of the street in those locations, and so it's a collector, so it has fairly high volume, about 2,500 cars per day. It really, and there's some existing, because there's new development on it, there's increased driving use, there's also increased pedestrian use, and it has very substandard facilities. So that one is just, that one jumped out way ahead of, doing curb cuts in the university district. Not to say that that's not a valuable project. I mean, the thing that we try and underscore as planners is that there is so much need here, and that our historic way of doing things is not really moving the dial on making it safer, comfortable, and safer, more comfortable, more convenient for people to walk, and that we need a different way of doing things. The issue, or the hesitancy that I see that could form around the concept of a bond, would be that, and this was true, we faced this 12 years ago when we changed to that kind of insurance model, is that people who previously had to pay 100% said, hey, how come I had to pay 100%? Now my neighbor only has to pay $3,500 and I had to pay 10 grand. That doesn't seem fair. Similarly, I could see if we were to bond for this, people who had just paid $3,500 are going to say, how come I had to pay that? And now I'm not only that, but I'm being asked to, not only do my neighbors not have to pay, but I'm being asked to help pay for their sidewalks too. I think it becomes a political issue that is, it's challenging. It's one that I don't know there are easy answers. So I think that messaging, one of the things that this board could really help with, if again, I'd love to see a recommendation from this board that get pursued. But if it does, one of the things I could see this board really helping with would be messaging around why this is important, and why that would have to happen. Why should this happen? Why should people vote for something like this?
James and Britt, I think, have their hands up. Britt, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, real quick, just an idea for that. It might be an expensive thing that could be rolled into the bond, but a rebate program for people who feel like they've paid too much that could apply to a board for some relief, if they could show that they had current hardship, perhaps. So that would be a way to deal with that.
I like that idea. I think that is very clever. James, did you want to comment? You had your hand up for a bit. I don't hear James.
Hi, can you hear me? No, I don't have a comment to make. I just left the hand up.
Okay, cool. Well, I think that's exciting new direction. I feel like there's some challenges, like you were just saying, but I feel like we can innovate around them. And if our community is just like the library and the schools and the parks, I feel like this community cares about each other and being there for people. And if we can get this done, for the future generations, then we should do it. And I think we shouldn't let the obstacles stop us. So I'm really excited about pursuing that in our work plan, and finding out more about how you get a municipal bond put forward. I think it has to be voter approved, but who approves, who does the process of it, I don't really know, but we can find out.
Yeah. One quick thing that I will say is that there certainly are people already working on trying to establish the bridge, the railroad bridge, to be a trail connection over the river at, where the Bitterroot Trail connects from Fresh Market over to McCormick Park. So that's certainly being, there are people working on that already. Any other kind of questions about like either current sidewalk projects and what's entailed in them? I guess I want to talk about that a little bit more. So I mentioned Eaton Street. There's the challenges there include some of the ditch crossings, and I should have designs to share at an upcoming meeting, probably December for that. Maybe we'll wait till January since November and December are kind of filling up already, and we want to be going out to the neighborhood at the same time that we go out to the public. So I don't want to necessarily jump the gun here if we're not ready to schedule a neighborhood meeting. We'll look for that sometime soon. But typically, we like to share 30% design drawings with the board, and so that's something we want to see. Similarly, Turner, Warden, North Fifth. That's another one that is moving forward. I don't know that construction will happen next year, but we're starting to put designs together for those. That will include sidewalks completely around the North Side Park, where Garden City Harvest has community gardens and where there's ball fields right now. It will go along sidewalks along the cemetery as well on the southern edge, and it will wrap the corner, but it won't go all the way up the western edge of the Catholic cemetery. And it will connect out to Scott Street. There will be bulb outs incorporated at intersections to reduce pedestrian crossings. Turner, Ward North Fifth, again, it was selected because it's the truck route through the neighborhood. It's the place where we're routing all of our vehicles that are going out to the dump and coming off of Orange Street and going to the dump. That's how we want them to go. So it's imperative that we provide space for other people. We are also simultaneously looking at bike route through there. And so where possible, we're going to get bike lanes on Turner, Warden, and North Fifth. But there's a section kind of in a residential section, North Fifth, where the street is too narrow to get bike lanes. And so we're looking at ways to route bike traffic up Kennett. And then there's already a little trail connection along the backside and then through Northside Park to connect back with Warden. And so we'll have more info to share about that when we present that plan. That project also will include, if there's any Northsiders here or people familiar with that neighborhood, there's currently a pretty weird intersection at Stoddard, Warden, and North Fifth. That is going to be redesigned, potentially a bean-shaped roundabout that we are referring to as the Beanabout. That would be fully mountable to allow truck traffic to make the necessary movements, but that would guide passenger vehicles in a more calm manner through that intersection. And then the Ivy Franklin Park project would make permanent some of the quick build traffic calming features that were added last year on Franklin. And so we're really excited about that. This is kind of the way we envisioned the neighborhood traffic management program working. And this would be the first project that had actually happened where we did a quick build set of circles and bulb outs. And then we came through and made them permanent a few years later after seeing what worked and what didn't. And so again, that one is probably third on the list compared to the other two. And we won't see construction this next year for that, but we will likely the year following. But we will, again, we'll bring, once we have designs to share, we'll bring those back to the board. But something to keep in mind is that we will be trying to make those quick build features permanent. And that project will be broken into phases. And so that Ivy Franklin will be the first phase, and then it'll stop just north of Mount Avenue. And then the second phase would include the Mount Park and Plymouth intersection. And it would head south down Park. The sidewalk largely exists, but the corners don't meet ADA, neither do the driveways. And the sidewalks are fairly old, and so they're fairly broken up in places there too. So we would look at extending the quick build features further south down Park, as a way to see what works and what doesn't in advance of coming through with a permanent infrastructure project.
Hey, Ben, since you mentioned Mount, it's all dug up and we spent quite a bit of time discussing how we wanted a bike lane. Will that, when it's all put back together, is Mount gonna have 2 traffic and then the bike lanes on the side, or what's gonna happen?
It's not dug up far enough to actually incorporate some of our ideas. And that was by design because we want to have a bigger conversation about it next year. There were some things that needed to be done for water right now though. And so it's only dug up from Brooks to just east of Bow Street. And so it's less than a block. I know that if you pass through there, it seems kind of like a battle zone, but it's in the grand scheme of things, we wouldn't be able to tie into the parts west of there. And so next year, like I haven't seen a draft list from Brian yet, but he's working on it. We should have that sooner than later too to get to the board. But my guess is that we will see a resurfacing project, or at the very least a chip seal project for Mount next year. And so we'll get to have that conversation about how do we restripe it, but it won't be. Well, first of all, our stripers got put away for the year already this year, but they didn't dig up enough to consider redoing it, so that we didn't have to worry about that this year. But the goal is to address it next year.
Okay, thanks.
And again, and the way that I'm trying to explain this is that the board is the reason that we did less than more, because we knew that we wanted to address that street more holistically. They were keeping the dug up area to as small as they could, so that we didn't have to, because we didn't know exactly when the work would happen and when it would get done. They didn't want to do so much that they couldn't put back what we wanted. So everyone wants to follow our recommendations. We just want to have the time and the distance to be able to do it right. And so they only dug up what they absolutely needed to, so that we can address this more holistically next year.
James, go ahead.
I did notice in the construction or the reconstruction of the parts that were impacted on Mount that perhaps there is more left-hand turn lane northbound on Brooks, and a reduction of that center turn lane in negotiating those distances. And just that subtle change makes the roadway feel wider. I'm sure a lot of it's like just the asphalt improvement, but with elimination or removal of portions of center turn lane, the road feels wider, safer. I'm sure motorists are feeling motivated to maybe drive faster through the area, but it is a relatively high-speed road during residential, and it's just, it feels the asphalt is obviously improved, but additionally the growth in travel lanes with the shortening of the center turn lane has made a different feeling of the road, both as a driver and a cyclist.
Oh, that's good kind of firsthand information, James. Please keep documenting that. Again, we're not going to get out and change any striping this year. Chad already put his truck away, but we will, all of that will play into how and when we address things next year.
All right, we have other comments about sidewalk concerns or some of the things that Ben's discussed. All right, everybody's pretty quiet. Ben, is there anything else that you want to share about the sidewalks?
I don't think so. I guess just let's keep this conversation in mind next spring when we start going through the CIP list. Hopefully, I don't know that we're going to have anything knocked off, but we'll certainly have better cost estimates. And again, as we look at those project priorities, we'll keep the PED facilities plan in mind and kind of how we're going through, how we're prioritizing projects for funding. Hopefully that is we've painted a clearer picture for you about that so that we can, yeah, so it's a little more transparent in how we make these decisions.
I dare bring it up, but I really like that document and how you guys use the scoring. Is there a bike facilities document that is identical to that?
I didn't catch all of that, Jesse. I'm having some internet.
Oh, that's okay. I was just saying that pedestrian facilities document is awesome. Is there a bicycle facilities
Uh-oh.
document just like it?
I really didn't catch that. I'm sorry. I'm going to stop my video and hopefully I'll hear you.
Okay. All right. So basically, I was just asking if there's an equivalent document to the pedestrian facilities document for bike facilities.
There is there is a bike facilities master plan that's also on that website, that same website, MissoulaMPO.com.
Awesome. So especially for new board members, that would be a good thing, Nick, for you to check out. If you have time, the MPO website is great. And definitely that would be something to look at. The other thing that I wanted to give you guys a heads up about, which we briefly mentioned in the opening, is the two-way conversion. Ben has indicated that they have 30% engineering drawings or plans that they want to discuss with us in November. And so, Ben, what would be helpful for the board to do before that?
I don't know that we're ready necessarily to come in November. I don't think the city's meeting internally to see what we think about the plans and if these are ready to share out and get public feedback on. It's possible that they're not, and so I'll keep the board updated, and we'll have a presentation when it comes. It may not be November, it may not even be December, depending on how our conversation goes later this week. I think that when this does come, Jesse, I will keep you posted as chair, when we're planning on trying to find time on the agenda, and then we will get the plan set, or at least the relevant pages attached to the agenda so that people can start familiarizing themselves with what they're looking at. I know that it can be, if you don't look at these things all the time, it can be kind of hard to orient yourself to a plan, a set of plan documents for a street. But what the board could do, knowing that this is coming in the not too distant future, regardless of month, there's on the Missoula Redevelopment Agency's website, there should be a project page for the front main conversion, because they led a feasibility study back in 2014 or 15 that set the groundwork for the engineering that's happening right now. And so basically they did a planning study to show that two-way conversion would be beneficial because it's well, first of all, we have three public parking garages on one-way streets, so it leads to a lot of out-of-direction driving by having one-way streets. And their feasibility study showed that it would work and created some general designs. The other document to look at and refresh yourselves on is the downtown master plan, because that also had really good suggestions for how front and main could look when they were converted back to two-way.
And then Ben, is there an update from Aaron on the narrowing of the list for the congestion mitigation funding?
Great question. There is not. We're continuing to meet internally, and we're still finding we're trying to figure out what is the how are we going to nominate what projects to put forward? There will be a public component of that when the time comes, but there's no real news. The only thing that's happened since we gave you the heads up that it was happening is we met once internally to kind of share those same, because we had just developed, there was just a handful of us that developed that. We met with a larger internal group that included representatives from the health department who monitor the air quality things, which is what the money is, congestion mitigation air quality money. We met, representatives of the health department and parks, both city and county, county public works folks, city public works folks, and just had a larger conversation saying, here's the 8 or so projects that we've identified as wanting to rank, and running some of the criteria by them and saying, basically, how do we continue to push this conversation forward? And so it's moving a little slow, but we want to be sure that we're getting the best bang for our buck with this air quality money. We also don't want to be holding on to money when we are saying also that that money's hard to come by. So we do want to spend it sooner than later, but we want to make sure that it's the right project or projects that we are choosing to fund. One of the variables in the calculus there is that when you use federal money, you federalize the project. And so that requires different levels of oversight from MDT, from the Montana Department of Transportation. It requires different amounts of reporting and types of reporting that you do. And it can inflate the cost of the project. And so, and the timeline, it can elongate the timeline of the project. And so those are some of the trade-offs that we're looking at, is where do we put this money where it really makes sense to federalize a project that we can't do locally, or so those are some of the conversations that we're having.
Jessica, you've had your hand up for a while. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, kind of moving backwards in time here. I'm dealing with a bedtime routine. I was wondering about so going back to the sidewalks, and the work on 3rd and Myrtle, and all of the coordination with the Office of Neighborhoods. I'm just wondering what is stopping us from putting in curb ramps on places like, I live on Chestnut and 3rd, and several of those ramps are non-existent. And so obviously it's thinking a lot smaller than a municipal bond and kind of an overhaul of everything, but they're very effective at 3rd and Myrtle. And so I just wondered whether that's a possibility anywhere to put in temporary curb ramps, and what would go into that.
It's a very good question. 3rd and Myrtle are the first that we've ever done like that, and we're going to see how they make it through the winter, and if places if places keep them shoveled, keep them clear, if it's fairly easy there because they're behind bulb out, so we're not worried about them getting hooked on a plow or a car tire or anything like that. But it's certainly something that we've never thought about before. We did it at 3rd and Myrtle, and now we're like, maybe this can work. So maybe we'll check back in the spring at how well those held up, and we can really entertain that conversation as a way to make some short-term advances.
Yeah, that's interesting. Forgot about winter, but
All right, unless anyone has any other comments. Ben, are you ready to wrap up, or anything else? I don't know. Looks like everybody's frozen.
Oh, I'm
And
not
you guys.
You're not frozen for me anymore.
Oh, good. Okay. All right. So it looks like, since we don't have a parks update because Neil couldn't make it, old business, I don't think there's anything on there. New business is just officer nominations moving forward. And so if someone wants to make a nomination, we just need you to make a nomination, and then someone else to second that. And then we will vote next meeting in November.
I had thought that, again, my elderly mind may not be connected well anymore. I thought we had made nominations last meetings, Jessica. I thought we nominated you for president and Jesse for chair rather, and Jesse for vice chair, but I could be wrong about that, obviously. But if not, if I am incorrect about that, I would do so at this time. Nominate yourself for chair and Jesse for vice chair.
Okay, so Jessica Doherty Goodburn as chair.
Sorry, not Jesse, James.
Okay, wait, so, all right, so let's make the motion again really quickly.
At this point, I nominate Jesse, yourself, continue as chair, and for James Walther for vice chair.
Okay, so then we need a second. It's fine with me to continue in this role. James, is it fine with you? Do you accept would you accept the nomination? Yeah, just giving a thumbs up. All right, we just need a second.
I'll second.
All right, then those are the nominations. We'll just vote next meeting, and appreciate that. Hopefully we can get a sidewalk bond. That might be our crowning achievement of the bike pedestrian board. Let's see. Announcements wise, anyone have other announcements? Okay, I don't have any other announcements. The next meeting is going to be November 8th at 6:15. It'll be virtual. I requested it to be a work session. So we come up with our work plan. We vote on the officers. It should not be heavy with city business. That was one of the things in the board training that they suggested, is that not all the meetings have to be so structured. It's healthy to have kind of more free-flowing meetings. And so I'm all about that. So we'll meet again in November and then be ready and thinking about what you want the work plan to be. All right, any other questions? Okay, well, we did pretty good, 7:32. I think, I don't know how people are feeling about the evening meeting, but I feel like it's okay. So we could talk about it in November and see what you guys really think. Ben, anything else from you? No? All right, this meeting is therefore adjourned at 7:33, and have a great October to November. We'll see you soon.
Thanks. See you, everybody.